Hello, and welcome to my beginner's guide to Necromancy combat. We'll be using Revolution as the basis for this guide, so if you don't know what that is or how to set it up, you can refer to my short guide on that linked in the description. The goal here is to equip you with a Revolution bar that you understand, help you navigate manual input strategies, and establish some expectations. This guide assumes that you have unlocked everything in the Well of Souls, have acquired at minimum tier 70 weapons, and that you are transitioning from Revolution++. With all that laid out, let's first talk about the Revolution bar. This is what's going to be automatically cycling when you may or may not be paying attention to your abilities. There are only a handful of practical configurations, and which one you choose at this point doesn't really matter. The bar at the top is what's recommended by PVME, and the bar at the bottom is what I personally use at most bosses. Both bars start with Conjure Undead Army because of how potent conjures are for Necromancy combat. When selecting which minions you want to conjure, note that the Skeleton and Ghost are essential, while the Zombie and Phantom are generally not. Conjure Undead Army is used over individual conjure abilities because it conjures all of your selected minions at once. Placing it at the beginning of your Revolution bar ensures that your conjures are always prioritized. Both bars also have Command Vengeful Ghost placed in the second slot of the Revolution bar. It's a once per conjure ability that provides your ghost the ability to continually debuff your target with Haunt. All of the damage you deal to a target with this debuff will be boosted, so it's important that this ability is used as soon as your ghost is conjured. Where the bars differ is the placement of Command Skeleton. PVME places the ability in the third slot, which provides a greater damage output in controlled settings. I place it at the end of my bar because I want to prioritize building my stacks in Adrenaline. This allows me to better prepare for boss mechanics and more easily execute damage rotations. Now, conjures aside, we're left with two basic abilities on both Revolution bars: Touch of Death and Soul Sap. These are what build Necrosis and Residual Soul stacks respectively. Touch of Death generally comes first because of its increased potency under Living Death and because of its longer cooldown relative to Soul Sap. Before I move on to manual inputs, I want to highlight a particular feature. Your character will resort to using the Necromancy basic ability if everything on your Revolution bar is on cooldown and nothing else is manually queued. So you don't have to worry about not being able to attack just because you have nothing else on your bar. As you cycle through your basics, you will find yourself accumulating Necrosis, which looks like this on your buff bar, and Residual Souls above your head. These can be used through a variety of abilities to deal extra damage and optionally stun your target. Since stunning is more relevant to boss-specific strategy, I'm only going to focus on their uses for damage. For Necrosis, it's ideal to expend them through the Death Guard's special attack when you have 8 or more stacks. But if you're not in the position to also expend Adrenaline, using Finger of Death with 6 or more stacks is a fine alternative. For Residual Souls, it's ideal to expend them through Volley of Souls when you have a full stack. It may be tempting to prematurely volley, but doing so can dampen your damage output in the long run. So at this point, you're looking at just 3 manual inputs: 2 alternatives for expending Necrosis, and 1 for expending Residual Souls. Another ability worth using is Bloat. This costs 20 Adrenaline and applies a potent damage over time effect. Although its duration can be refreshed, its damage doesn't stack with additional applications. So whether you're soloing or grouping, the protocol is this. If you intend for the target to be bloated, check to see if it already is. A bloated target will have the bloat icon in its debuff bar. If that's missing and you have the Adrenaline to spare, then go ahead and use the ability. The goal is to upkeep this effect without wasting Adrenaline. Speaking of Adrenaline, another use for it is Death Skulls. With some upgrades, it can be paired with Living Death to carry out a heavy damage rotation. But at this point in your journey, these two abilities just aren't efficient uses of Adrenaline. Upkeeping Bloat and using your Death Guard's special attack take priority. However, it's not uncommon to find yourself with enough adrenaline to spare, especially in group instances where others are upkeeping bloat for you. In this scenario, go ahead and use Death Skulls. The extra damage is usually worth it. And in situations where DPS is critical, you can drink a dose of adrenaline potion to force this scenario. You should now be looking at 5 offensive manual inputs. Before we consider anything else, let's take a look at an improvised example of everything I've explained so far. So I'm going to start by letting my Revolution Bar conjure for me. If this were a boss, I would ideally conjure before engaging. Command Vengeful Ghost shares a cooldown with Conjure Undead Army, so I'm going to apply Bloat while I wait on that. The target was just bloated and I have 100% adrenaline. Since I don't have many Necrosis stacks built up, I'm going to use Death Skulls here. I now have a full stack of residual souls, so I'm going to use Volley of Souls. I see that bloat wore off, so now I'm going to reapply it. I'm already back at a full stack of souls, so I'm going to volley again. I see that I'm now at a full stack of necrosis, so I'm going to use my Death Guard's special attack. The process should be pretty clear at this point, so I'm going to let this play out without further commentary. The demand for more inputs really depends on the specific content you're engaging with. This typically entails a combination of overhead prayers and defensive abilities. Sometimes the use of an offensive ability that I haven't mentioned is either warranted or even required in response to a boss mechanic. The most practical approach here is to do a study on the boss you intend to fight. Figure out what type of damage you're going to be taking and put the associated protection prayers on your bar. While you're at it, look into the mechanics you'll be facing and also add the most appropriate responses. That may be Resonance to absorb a large hit, or Soul Strike to interrupt an even larger one. I recommend practicing your offense either on dummies at War's Retreat or on simple bosses such as those of God Wars Dungeon 1. When you think you have a good handle on that, try some more complex bosses such as those of God Wars Dungeon 2 or normal mode Arc Glacior. This next level of bossing will demand low-level movement, prayer switching, and defensive ability use. Try to stick to a single boss for a while, making gradual improvements. Performance between kills may vary, but a couple of metrics worth improving over time are the frequency at which you get the kill and how quick your kills are. Once you feel comfortable with the boss and fairly consistent with your kill times, consider learning another boss of similar difficulty. It's important that you diversify your skill set before tackling bosses of even greater complexity. Your progression timeline is going to be largely individual, as PVMing is very much a skill in the classical sense. It's not a linear pathing, but rather ups and downs with many plateaus. Salient factors such as mood and interest will also influence your progression experiences. If trying to get the hang of a boss gets dull or starts to frustrate you, there's no shame in taking a step back. What's important is that you eventually return with a strategy. This is the sort of perseverance that will help you to keep growing as a PVMer. Now to address the elephant in the room: death. If you're pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone, which you should be as a beginner, death is practically inevitable. Repeatedly dying can be costly, frustrating, and discouraging. But let me assure you that this is a normal part of the process and that it's the upfront cost to later riches. Just remember that you can take breaks and return at a later time. As you progress your capabilities, you should also be continuing to unlock and purchase various combat upgrades. Since upgrade pathing is quite a nuanced topic, I won't be delving into that in this video. But there is one upgrade in particular that I think you should strive for. A trial for intermediacy, if you will. And that is an igneous cape. If this intimidates you, rest assured that it's intended to be a relatively long-term goal. There are plenty of stepping stones along the way. So you should now have a revolution bar, a separate set of abilities, the knowledge to use them, appropriate expectations, and a realistic end goal. If you have any questions regarding anything I discussed or feel like I overlooked something important, feel free to leave a comment. Also, this is meant to be the first installment of a comprehensive series. So depending on when you're watching this, I may have the next videos linked in the description. I hope you found this guide useful, and until next time, bye for now.